pain?
My greatest regret is that every brother I've lost was in a moment when we were not getting on. And so I have to live with that. Yeah. I'm the last man standing.
You all right?
Yeah. I'll never be able to understand that because I'm the eldest.
One of the most successful songwriters of all time, that of course would be Barry Gibb.
How did you come back? I'm waiting in line. From me, I wanna feel you in my arms again.
He sold over 220 million records, filled stadiums from Tokyo to Toronto, reinvented music not once, but 3 times, and outlived every single person who made it possible. Barry Gibb is the last of his kind, a man whose voice built an empire, but whose silence now echoes with the ghosts of 3 brothers. He's not just the last BG. He's the one who had to bury them all, the one left to carry a legacy that was never meant to be his alone. And today, with arthritis in his hands, a broken heart in his chest, and a farewell tour quietly sweeping across the world, he's finally starting to talk. What does it really feel like? To be the only one left standing on the stage. To understand how Barry Gibb went from global icon to grieving survivor, we have to rewind. Because the BeeGees weren't just a band, they were brothers, bound by blood, by harmony, and by tragedy. And when fame turned into isolation and applause turned into echoes, it wasn't the spotlight that faded, it was Barry. By 2025, he launched a quiet, unpublicized farewell tour. He's releasing music again, but only with the help of others. And his most private heartbreak has never been fully explained until now. Because one decision he made this year may mark the end of his entire public life. And it started with a promise, made at a grave. Barry Gibb was born in 1946 on the Isle of Man, a tiny rock between Ireland and England. The Gibb family was poor, 5 kids, a father who worked odd jobs, a mother who dreamed of something more. They moved to Manchester, then, halfway across the world, to Australia, chasing work, chasing stability. But in the middle of it all, there was always music. Barry, Robin, and Maurice found harmony the way some people find religion. It came naturally. By 12, Barry was writing songs. At 15, he was leading the family's musical ambition. They sang in cinemas, on street corners, in tiny broadcast booths that doubled as makeshift studios. They didn't have fans yet, but they had each other. And Barry? He had belief. He once said, "I never doubted we'd make it, not even once." But that belief would one day become both a gift and a curse. He was the eldest, the voice in the middle, the one who always looked ahead, while the others soaked in the moment. And because of that, he carried the hopes of everyone, long before the spotlight found them. There was a quiet pressure in his childhood: succeed or go home with nothing. He watched his parents pour their last coins into train tickets, watched his mother cry when gigs fell through. Barry knew that music wasn't just their dream, it was their way out. In 1967, the Gibb brothers returned to England with a handful of demos and not a single guarantee. They were talented, but the industry was flooded with hopefuls. Then came Robert Stigwood, a visionary who saw what others missed: emotional resonance. Their breakout hit, New York mining disaster 1941, struck a strange chord. Melancholy, mysterious. It didn't sound like anyone else, unless you mistook it for the Beatles, which many did. Soon came Massachusetts. To Love Somebody, words, songs about heartbreak, identity, loss.
And the lights all went down in Massachusetts.
And audiences listened closely. The BeeGees weren't legends yet, but the path was laid. And Barry? He was already thinking 5 albums ahead. By the late 70s, Barry helped launch his youngest brother Andy as a solo act. Andy Gibb became a pop star almost overnight. Shadow dancing. I just want to be your everything.
I just wanna be your everything.
But behind the smile, Andy was unraveling. Fame hit too fast. Drugs hit even faster. And Barry, both mentor and surrogate father, watched it unfold. He tried to intervene, took Andy to rehab. But Andy was drowning in the very ocean Barry had taught him to swim. In 1988, Andy died at just 30 years old, and Barry broke.
You all right?
Yeah.
He later confessed, "If I hadn't pushed him so hard, maybe he'd still be here." Everything changed after Andy. The BeeGees became quieter, Barry became more withdrawn, and for the first time, he questioned the very thing he had built. But before the silence, there was the explosion. Saturday Night Fever, 1977, the white suit, the falsetto, the disco ball. The BeeGees didn't just ride the disco wave, they were the wave. Staying alive.
Staying alive, staying alive. Feel the city breaking and everybody shaking and we're staying alive.
How deep is your love?
Need to show how deep is your love, is your love, how deep.
Night Fever. The album sold 40 million copies. The BeeGees weren't just popular, they were a phenomenon. But success came with a strange kind of loneliness. Barry once admitted, "We were massive, but we weren't happy." Critics turned on them. Disco became a punchline, but Barry kept writing. For Barbra Streisand, Dionne Warwick, Kenny Rogers, he adapted, reinvented, endured. And yet, the more he succeeded, the more he lost pieces of himself. In 2003, Maurice died suddenly from complications during surgery. Barry didn't speak for days, didn't leave his house for weeks. Maurice was more than a brother. He was Barry's mirror, the glue, as Barry called him. Robin kept going. They tried to perform, but the chemistry was broken. Then, in 2012, Robin died after a long battle with cancer. And Barry became the last living Gibb brother. He said, "There's nothing more terrible than outliving everyone who made you who you are." Grief became his new sound. He withdrew, stopped performing, turned off the radio. He lived quietly with Linda, his wife of 5 decades, in Miami, until something stirred. In 2021, he returned to the studio, not for charts, for memory. He recorded Green Fields.
And for once in my life, I'm alone.
Reimagining BeeGees classics with Dolly Parton, Keith Urban, Brandi Carlile. Barry said, "It's the closest I've felt to singing with my brothers again." It hit #1. But he didn't celebrate. He cried. Then another quiet loss. He and Linda divorced. No headlines, just a statement. "With love and respect, we are parting ways." And yet, Barry picked up the mic one more time. In 2025, he whispered, "One last time. No fanfare, no promo, just a final tour." He was 78. His hands ached. His voice wavered, but his soul, still strong. He wasn't performing for applause. He was chasing closure. Each night he chose songs that weren't just hits. They were messages, words. To love somebody? I started a joke. He walked on stage, whispered, "This is for my brothers." In London, the third night, he stood motionless before the crowd. Phones flashed, applause thundered. But Barry didn't react. He looked out, then whispered, "This is for Maurice, for Robin, for Andy." He sang To Love Somebody, his voice, older, but honest. When he hit the final line, he paused, closed his eyes, and held the silence. That silence said more than any lyric ever could. Barry Gibb may never tour again, but maybe he doesn't need to. He said, "You don't retire from music, you let it keep going without you." His melodies shaped generations, but his greatest gift was survival. He outlasted the spotlight and still carried the flame. To understand what he lost, you have to understand what the BeeGees were. 3 voices, 1 soul, a sound that couldn't exist unless they were all together. Barry once said their harmony was like chemistry, something he couldn't recreate with anyone else. In the studio, they didn't even need to speak. 1 breath, 1 nod, and the magic happened. When he lost them, he didn't just lose his brothers. He lost the sound, the bond, the thing that made it all matter, and that's why he held on to the demos, the tapes, the memories. And maybe that's why Barry Gibb kept singing, not because he had to, but because someone had to. Someone had to remember, someone had to hurt, someone had to keep the harmony alive, even in a world gone quiet. So here's the question. Was Barry Gibb the most underrated songwriter of the 20th century? Or was he something rarer? The one who paid the price to keep the music alive, even when he was the only one left holding it. To understand Barry Gibb's pain, you have to understand what he lost. Because the BeeGees weren't just a vocal group, they were an alchemy. 3 voices, 3 souls, fusing into one sound that defied explanation. Barry called it a chemical thing. He said when the 3 of them sang together, something mystical happened, something he couldn't replicate with anyone else. They didn't need to rehearse, they didn't even need to speak. 1 glance, 1 breath, and they were locked in. Their writing sessions were electric. Barry would strum a chord progression. Maurice might start humming a counter melody. Robin would dive into abstract lyrics. Within hours, they had songs that would live forever. Jive Talkin' came to life in the back of a car, inspired by the rhythm of tires hitting the bridge. Emotion was written in minutes, originally meant for them, but gifted to Samantha Sang. It was instinct. It was family. And when that was gone, Barry said writing became lonely. He still had ideas, still had melodies, but no one to finish his sentences, no one to laugh when he hit a wrong note, no one to say, "That's the one." And so he held on to the old demos, the tapes, the studio outtakes, sometimes just to hear their voices, not in harmony, but in conversation. When Barry made Green Fields, he didn't intend for it to be a comeback. He thought of it as a tribute album, not for the fans, but for himself. He chose collaborators who reminded him of the brothers, Dolly's warmth, Keith Urban's smooth control, Brandi Carlile's raw emotion. Each song was recorded in Nashville. Analog gear, wooden floors, vintage microphones. Barry said it felt like being in a church. Some days he couldn't get through a take. Other times he'd surprise himself, belting out harmonies he hadn't touched in decades. And in the silence between takes, he'd tell stories about Maurice's jokes, Robin's stubbornness, Andy's sweetness. The sessions became more than an album. They became therapy. When the project was done, Barry didn't throw a party. He lit a candle, played the masters alone in his living room, and cried. After the tour, Barry didn't issue a press statement. He simply went home. The spotlight faded, but the ripple continued. Online forums lit up with memories. Fans shared stories of weddings soundtracked by words, of fathers lost to cancer who sang "How Deep Is Your Love" at family reunions. Younger artists, Billie Eilish, Harry Styles, Bruno Mars, spoke publicly about his influence, saying his songwriting changed how they viewed melody, emotion, and arrangement. A university in Australia announced a Barry Gibb Songwriting Fellowship, and in Miami, a mural appeared, 3 silhouettes in harmony, with one figure standing alone beneath them. Barry never commented on it, but friends say he visited it late at night. He stood in silence for 20 minutes, then walked away. Barry Gibb didn't just survive his era, he outlasted the very machine that chewed so many up. He lived through Beatlemania, disco fever, the rock backlash, MTV, auto-tune, streaming, TikTok. And yet, his voice still matters, because in a world addicted to noise, Barry offered sincerity. His songs weren't just catchy, they were confessions, time capsules of feeling, blueprints for how to love and how to grieve. So when the curtain finally falls, maybe the real legacy isn't the sound he created, it's the silence he left behind, and the truth that one man, one voice, can carry the weight of 4 hearts and still sing.